The heat hits you like a wall when you step out of the rental car in Savannah. Even in late afternoon, the Georgia sun burns through the canopy of live oaks, draped in Spanish moss, casting everything in that golden, humid light that makes the whole city look like it's been dipped in honey. I pull my jacket off, the same worn blazer I've had since college, and toss it into the back seat. Already, sweat beads on my forehead. The Bellweather Estate sprawls before me like something out of a Southern Gothic novel. Whitewashed columns rise 3 stories high, supporting verandas that wrap around the mansion like elegant arms. Manicured gardens stretch toward the Savannah River, where I can see a few sailboats drifting lazily in the distance. This isn't just wealth. It's generational, old money wealth, the kind that builds monuments to itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My beat-up Honda Civic looks ridiculous parked between a gleaming Mercedes and what I think might be a Bentley. I grab my overnight bag from the trunk, checking my phone. 3 missed calls from Caleb, 2 texts asking where I am. The rehearsal dinner starts in an hour. You made it! I turn to see my younger brother jogging down the marble steps, arms spread wide. Caleb looks like he stepped off the cover of Southern Living magazine. Linen pants perfectly pressed, white button-down that probably costs more than I make in a week, that easy smile that's always opened doors for him. We embrace, and I catch a whiff of expensive cologne. Traffic was hell through Atlanta, I say, which isn't entirely true. I'd stopped at a roadside diner for 2 hours, nursing black coffee and trying to work up the courage to be here. Jesus, Eli, you look. He pauses, taking in my khakis and polo shirt, the closest thing to formal wear I own. You look good, man, really good. The lie sits between us like humidity. We both know I look exactly like what I am, a high school teacher who shops at Target and drives a car with 180,000 miles on it. So this is the place, huh? I gesture toward the mansion, trying to change the subject. Caleb's grin widens. Marianne's family has owned it for 4 generations, can you believe it? 4 generations, Eli. There's a portrait of her great-great-grandfather in the main hall, fought in the Civil War. Quote, I nod, wondering which side, but knowing better than to ask. This is Caleb's day, his moment. I'm just here to play the role of supportive older brother, smile for the photos, and try not to embarrass anyone. Dad's already here, Caleb says, and I catch something in his voice. A warning, maybe, or an apology. He's been asking about you. My stomach tightens. Russell Jennings has been asking about me, which means he's been cataloging my failures, preparing his disappointment for public display. It's what he does best. Great, I manage. Can't wait to catch up. Caleb claps me on the shoulder. Come on, let me show you around before the circus starts. Wait until you meet Marianne's father. He owns half of Tybee Island. We walk toward the house, my brother's voice fading into the background as he rattles off impressive facts about the estate, the guest list, the 5-course dinner planned for tonight. All I can think about is the weight of my father's expectations, heavy as the Georgian heat, settling on my shoulders like a familiar burden. The interior of the Bellweather Estate makes the outside look modest. Crystal chandeliers hang from coffered ceilings that must be 20 feet high, casting rainbows across walls lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. The floors are marble, real marble, not the fake stuff you see in strip malls, and my footsteps echo despite my efforts to walk quietly. Caleb leads me through a maze of rooms, each more impressive than the last. There's a library with leather-bound books that look like they've never been opened, a music room with a grand piano that gleams like black water, and a sitting room where delicate antique furniture sits, arranged around a fireplace big enough to roast a whole pig. The rehearsal dinner's in the sunroom, Caleb explains, guiding me toward the back of the house. Marianne wanted something intimate, just immediate family and the wedding party. Intimate. I count at least 40 people milling around the sunroom, which overlooks the gardens through floor-to-ceiling windows. The men wear blazers that fit like they were cut by tailors, and the women float in sundresses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I spot my mother near the windows, talking to a woman dripping in pearls. Mom catches my eye and waves, her smile bright but strained. She's wearing the navy dress she bought for my high school graduation 10 years ago. Then I see him. Russell Jennings stands near the bar, bourbon in hand, holding court with 3 other men who nod along to whatever story he's telling. Even at 65, Dad commands attention. His silver hair is perfectly groomed, his posture military straight, and his voice carries that authoritative tone that made me nervous as a kid and still does now. He spots me before I can find somewhere to hide. "Eli!" His voice booms across the room, and several conversations pause. "There's my boy. Come here, son." I walk over like a man, approaching his execution. The other men, all wearing expensive watches and confident smiles, turn to study me with the kind of polite interest reserved for exotic animals at the zoo. "Gentlemen, this is my oldest son, Eli," Dad says, wrapping an arm around my shoulders in what looks like affection but feels like a restraint. Eli's our academic in the family. The way he says academic makes it sound like a disease. "What do you teach?" asks one of the men, a heavy-set guy with kind eyes. "English. High school English." I try to inject some pride into my voice, but it comes out flat. "Oh, how noble," says another man, and I can't tell if he's being sincere or condescending. "My daughter's teacher changed her life. Teachers are so important." I smile and nod, waiting for Dad to chime in with something supportive. Instead, he takes a long sip of bourbon and changes the subject. "Jim here owns the largest construction firm in Atlanta," Dad says, gesturing to the heavy-set man. "Built half the downtown skyline. And Robert just sold his tech company for 8 figures. The men beam with appropriate modesty while I stand there like a piece of furniture, expensive enough to display but not valuable enough to showcase. "Uncle Russell!" A young woman in a flowing white rehearsal dress glides toward us, and I know immediately this must be Marianne. She's beautiful in that effortless way that money can buy. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect skin that's never seen a day of real work. But there's something genuine in her smile as she kisses my father's cheek. "Marianne, sweetheart, you remember my son Eli," Dad says. "Of course. Caleb talks about you all the time." She extends a manicured hand. "I'm so excited to finally meet the writer and the family." "Teacher," Dad corrects quickly. "Eli teaches high school." "Oh, but didn't Caleb say you write poetry?" Marianne's eyes light up with what seems like genuine interest. I feel my face flush. "Just as a hobby, nothing serious." "How wonderful. I studied literature at Vanderbilt. Who are your influences?" Before I can answer, Caleb appears at Marianne's side like a golden retriever who's heard his name called. He's changed into a dinner jacket that makes him look like a young Kennedy. "Babe, you're not boring my brother with book talk, are you?" He laughs, but there's an edge to it. Caleb's always been protective of his territory, even when we were kids. "Actually, we were discussing," Marianne starts. "Eli," Mom appears, slightly breathless. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." She hugs me tight, and I catch the familiar scent of her drugstore perfume. It's comforting after all the expensive fragrances floating around the room. "You look handsome," she whispers, though we both know it's not true. I look exactly like what I am, a man who shops at thrift stores and gets his hair cut at great clips. "Carla, you must try the shrimp," says the woman in pearls, appearing at Mom's elbow. "It's from our own beds down on Tybee Island." Mom nods enthusiastically, though I know she's never eaten shrimp that didn't come from the frozen section of Kroger. "Mrs. Bellweather, this is my older son Eli," Mom says, her voice carrying that forced brightness she uses when she's nervous. Mrs. Bellweather, Marianne's mother, looks me up and down with the practiced eye of someone who spent her life categorizing people by their net worth and social utility. "How lovely," she says in a voice like silk over steel. "And what do you do, Eli?" He's a teacher, Mom jumps in before I can answer. High school English. He's wonderful with the children. How civic-minded, Mrs. Bellweather says, and somehow makes public service sound like a character flaw. A soft chime echoes through the sunroom, and conversations begin to fade as people drift toward the dining room. I follow the crowd, trying to stay close to Mom, but the social current carries us in different directions. I find myself seated at the far end of a table that stretches nearly the length of the room, between an elderly woman who immediately begins complaining about her hip replacement and a young man who spends the entire appetizer course talking about his yacht. From my position, I can see the head of the table where Dad sits with the other patriarchs, their voices carrying over the gentle clatter of silverware on china. Caleb and Marianne hold court in the middle, surrounded by young professionals who laugh at everything they say. Mom is somewhere in between, nodding politely at stories about European vacations and private schools. I pick at my salad, something with exotic greens and a vinaigrette that probably costs more per ounce than I spend on lunch for a week, and try to make conversation with the hip replacement woman. Her name is Constance, and she's Marianne's great-aunt. She tells me about her late husband's textile empire and her ongoing battles with various servants and contractors. Young people today have no work ethic, she declares, stabbing a cherry tomato with unnecessary violence. In my day, if you wanted something, you worked for it. None of this participation trophy nonsense. I nod and murmur agreement, though I wonder what she'd think if she knew I worked 2 jobs, teaching during the day and tutoring kids whose parents can't afford college prep courses at night, just to afford my studio apartment and student loan payments. What do you do, dear? Constance asks, as if she's just remembering I exist. I teach English at Roosevelt High School. Her fork pauses halfway to her mouth. Public school? Yes, ma'am. She sets down her fork entirely. How generous of you. I suppose someone has to do it. The main course arrives, some kind of fish with a sauce I can't identify, and I focus on eating while conversations swirl around me about stock portfolios and country club politics. Occasionally, someone asks me a polite question about teaching, usually followed by a story about their own child's expensive private school or tutor. I catch fragments of Dad's conversation from the head of the table. He's telling someone about Caleb's latest real estate deal, his voice swelling with pride. That boy's got the Midas touch, he says. Everything he touches turns to gold. I take a large gulp of wine, something French and probably older than I am, and try to ignore the familiar ache in my chest. The servers clear the main course, and I'm beginning to think I might make it through the evening without incident when Dad stands up, tapping his knife against his wine glass. The gentle chime cuts through the conversation like a bell, and 40 faces turn toward him expectantly. Friends, family, Dad begins, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. Before we move on to dessert, I wanted to say a few words about why we're here. Quote, he's in his element now, standing at the head of that grand table with all eyes on him. This is Russell Jennings at his best. The decorated colonel, the successful businessman, the patriarch holding court. Tomorrow we celebrate the union of 2 remarkable young people, he continues, raising his glass toward Caleb and Marianne. My son Caleb has always been driven, always been a winner. In school, on the baseball field, and now in business. He's the kind of man who sees what he wants and goes after it. Approving murmurs ripple around the table. Caleb beams, his arm around Marianne's shoulders. And Marianne, well, what can I say about a young woman who graduated summa cum laude from Vanderbilt, speaks 3 languages, and runs her own interior design firm? She's exactly the kind of partner a successful man needs. More murmurs, warmer now. Mrs. Bellweather practically glows with pride. Dad pauses, taking a sip of wine, and I start to relax. Maybe this will be simple. A toast to the happy couple, some gentle ribbing, and then dessert. But then his eyes find mine across the room, and I see something familiar in his expression. The same look he used to give me when I brought home report cards with A's in English and C's in math, when I chose theater over sports, when I announced I was majoring in education instead of business. You know, Dad continues, his voice taking on a different tone, Caleb's always been my successful son. Even as kids, he was the one winning trophies, bringing home awards, making his old man proud. My stomach drops. I know where this is going. His older brother Eli. Dad nods in my direction, and suddenly 40 pairs of eyes are on me. Well, Eli chose a different path, the quieter path, you might say. Teaching high school, writing little poems, not exactly what you'd call ambitious, but someone has to do those jobs, right? A few uncomfortable chuckles. I feel my face burning, but I keep my expression neutral. This is nothing new. This is Dad being Dad. I used to worry about Eli, he continues, warming to his theme now. Wondered if maybe we'd been too easy on him, if maybe he'd lost his drive somewhere along the way. But then I realized, not everyone can be a winner. Some people are just content with less. The words hit me like physical blows. Content with less. As if choosing to spend my days trying to inspire teenagers to love literature, to think critically, to see the world beyond their small corners of it, is somehow settling. As if the hours I spend grading papers and writing college recommendation letters and staying after school to help kids who have nowhere else to go represents some kind of failure of imagination. But that's okay, Dad says, raising his glass higher. Every family needs someone to keep things grounded, right? Someone to remind us not everyone can reach the heights. And Eli, well, he's perfectly happy being our, what should I call it, our unsuccessful one. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The silence that follows is deafening. I can feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction, and for a moment I consider standing up, walking out, driving back to my small apartment and my small life, and never speaking to any of them again. Instead, I raise my own glass and force a smile. To Caleb and Marianne, I say, and my voice doesn't shake even though my hands do. The table erupts in relieved applause and hears, grateful for an escape from the uncomfortable moment. Conversations resume, but they're quieter now, more strained. Mom is staring at Dad with an expression I've never seen before, something between disappointment and fury. Caleb won't meet my eyes. I excuse myself and head for the restroom, needing a moment to collect myself. The hallway is mercifully empty and quiet after the noise of the dining room. I splash cold water on my face and stare at myself in the ornate mirror above the sink. This is who you are, I tell myself. This is your place in the family, in the world. The unsuccessful one. The reminder of what happens when you don't reach high enough. I'm making my way back to the dining room when I hear a voice behind me. Excuse me, Eli. Eli Jennings. I turn to see a man in clerical collar approaching me. He's young, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. It takes me a moment to place him, and when I do, my heart stops. Tommy? I whisper. Tommy Avery? His smile broadens. It's Father Avery now, actually. Thomas. But yes. He extends his hand, and when I take it, he covers it with both of his. My God, Mr. Jennings, I can't believe you're here. Thomas Avery. I haven't thought about him in years, but suddenly I can see him clearly as he was at 17. Skinny, quiet, always sitting in the back row of my AP English class. The kid who never spoke unless called on, who turned in beautiful essays about darkness and isolation, who worried me enough that I started keeping him after class just to talk. I'm officiating the ceremony tomorrow, he says. Mrs. Bellweather requested me specifically. Apparently we have some family connection I'm not entirely clear on. But I never imagined. He shakes his head, still gripping my hand. You look exactly the same. I want to disagree. I feel like I've aged a decade in the past hour alone, but something in his expression stops me. There's a reverence there, a warmth that I haven't felt in years. So you became a priest, I say, trying to remember what I knew about Tommy's plans after graduation. That's wonderful. Because of you, he says simply. The words hang in the air between us. From the dining room, I can hear the gentle buzz of conversation resuming, the clink of dessert spoons against china. Tommy, Father Thomas, there you are. Mrs. Bellweather's voice cuts through the hallway like a knife. She approaches us with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to having her schedule followed precisely. "We're ready for you to offer the blessing over dessert." "Of course," Thomas says, but he doesn't release my hand. "Mrs. Bellweather, I don't believe you've met." "Oh, we've met," she says dismissively. "Eli is the groom's brother. Now, if you don't mind, Father, we really should." "Actually," Thomas interrupts, and there's something new in his voice, an authority that wasn't there when he was 17 and struggling with depression in my classroom. "I'd very much like Eli to join us. Mrs. Bellweather, I don't think you understand. This man saved my life." Mrs. Bellweather's eyebrows rise nearly to her hairline. "I beg your pardon." "Mr. Jennings was my teacher," Thomas continues, his voice growing stronger. "My English teacher at Roosevelt High School. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be standing here today." I try to wave him off, to deflect the attention, but Thomas is just getting started. "Shall we return to the others?" he asks, and it's not really a question. We walk back into the dining room together, Thomas still in his collar, me trailing behind like a confused shadow. The conversations die down as we approach the head table, and I see Dad's eyes narrow as he takes in the priest's obvious familiarity with me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Bellweather announces, her voice tight with confusion, "Father Avery would like to offer a blessing before dessert." Thomas nods, but instead of launching into a standard prayer, he does something unexpected. He places his hand on my shoulder. "Before I do," he says, his voice carrying easily across the room, "I'd like to share something with you all. Something about grace and second chances and the way God works through the most unexpected people." I try to step away, but his grip is firm. 15 years ago, I was a 17-year-old kid who thought the world was ending. My parents had just divorced, I was struggling with depression, and I honestly didn't see much point in continuing. I was in Mr. Jennings's AP English class at Roosevelt High School, and I was barely hanging on. The room has gone completely silent. Even the servers have stopped moving. I wrote an essay for his class, Thomas continues. It was supposed to be about Hamlet, but it turned into this dark meditation on suicide and meaninglessness. Most teachers would have given me a grade and moved on. Mr. Jennings kept me after class. My throat is tight. I remember that day. Remember the fear in Tommy's eyes, the careful way I had to approach the subject, the hours we spent talking about Hamlet and hope, and the way literature can help us make sense of chaos. He didn't lecture me, Thomas says. He didn't call my parents or send me to the counselor. He just talked to me. About books, about writing, about the way stories can help us understand that we're not alone in our pain. He gave me a copy of Mary Oliver's poetry and told me to come back tomorrow if I wanted to talk more. I can see faces around the room beginning to change, confusion giving way to attention, dismissal shifting to interest. I came back the next day, and the next. For the rest of that semester, Mr. Jennings gave up his lunch breaks to talk with me. He introduced me to writers who had struggled with darkness and found light. He helped me see that my pain could be transformed into something meaningful, something that could help others. Thomas's voice is stronger now, more confident. This is the voice of someone who's found his calling. By graduation, I knew I wanted to dedicate my life to helping people the way Mr. Jennings had helped me. I went to seminary, was ordained 3 years ago, and now I had the privilege of serving a parish in Charleston, but none of that would have happened without this man. He turns to look at me directly, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Mr. Jennings never asked for recognition, never mentioned our conversations to anyone as far as I know. He just saw a kid who needed help and gave it quietly, consistently, without expecting anything in return. That's the kind of teacher, the kind of person he is. The silence in the room is different now, heavier, more thoughtful. I can see Mom dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Even Mrs. Bellweather looks shaken. So when Mrs. Bellweather asked me to bless this meal, Thomas concludes, I couldn't help but think about the kind of blessing Mr. Jennings has been in my life. The quiet, steady presence that asks for nothing but gives everything. That's what real success looks like, not in awards or achievements, but in the lives we touch, the people we help become who they're meant to be. He pauses, looking around the room at all those faces that had been politely dismissive of me just an hour earlier. They say teaching is a thankless job, he says, but I'm here to give thanks. For a man who saw potential where others saw problems, who offered hope when everything seemed hopeless, who taught me that literature isn't just about books, it's about understanding what it means to be human. Finally, he turns back to me, and in his eyes I see the same reverence I remember from students who really got it, who understood that what we were doing in that classroom mattered. "Thank you, Mr. Jennings," he says simply, "for everything." The blessing that follows is brief and beautiful, but I barely hear it. My mind is reeling, trying to process what just happened, the way 40 strangers are now looking at me with something approaching respect. When Thomas finishes, the room erupts in applause, not the polite golf claps from earlier, but real, sustained appreciation. People begin approaching me as dessert is served. The elderly woman with the hip replacement wants to tell me about her grandson who's struggling in school. The yacht owner mentions his daughter who's thinking about teaching. Even Mrs. Bellweather, though she remains coolly polite, asks thoughtful questions about public education. But it's Dad's reaction I'm watching for, and Dad remains conspicuously silent. He sits at the head of the table, methodically eating his creme brulee, his face unreadable. When people try to engage him about his son, the teacher, he responds with non-committal grunts and changes the subject. It's not until the evening is winding down, guests beginning to drift toward the verandas and gardens, that he finally approaches me. I'm standing by the windows, watching the sun set over the Savannah River, when I feel his presence beside me. "That was quite a performance," he says quietly. "It wasn't a performance, Dad. It was the truth." "Was it?" He takes a sip of bourbon, his eyes fixed on the water. "Because from where I sit, it looked like some kid trying to make you feel better about your choices." The words hit me like a slap, but I don't flinch. Maybe it's Thomas's words still echoing in my head. Or maybe it's just that I'm tired of this dance we've been doing for 30 years. "You really can't stand it, can you?" I say. The idea that maybe, just maybe, I'm doing something that matters. What matters is results, Eli. What matters is achievement. You can tell yourself all the pretty stories you want about touching lives and changing the world, but at the end of the day, you're still making $35,000 a year and living in a studio apartment. And that's how you measure success? Money? Status? That's how the world measures success. He turns to face me fully now, and I can see the frustration that's been building all evening. "You think I wanted to watch my son become this? You think I wanted to tell people that my oldest boy teaches high school?" The honesty of it, the raw disappointment in his voice, takes my breath away. But for the first time in my life, I don't apologize for it. "I think about Tommy Avery," I say slowly. "About Sarah Martinez, who's now a pediatric nurse, because I helped her find her confidence in writing. About Marcus Thompson, who went from failing English to studying journalism at Georgia Southern. About the dozens of kids who've told me I made a difference, who've come back years later to say thank you. And that pays the bills." "No, Dad. It pays something else, something you apparently can't understand." We stand there in silence, two men who've never really known how to talk to each other, watching the last light fade from the sky. Finally, Dad sets down his glass and looks at me with something that might be pity. "You could have been anything, Eli, anything at all. And you chose to be ordinary." "I chose to be useful," I reply. "There's a difference." The morning dawns bright and clear, with just enough breeze off the river to keep the Georgia heat at bay. I dress carefully in my one good suit, navy blue, bought on sale at Men's Warehouse 3 years ago, and make my way to the estate early. The wedding isn't until 4, but I want some time to walk the grounds, to clear my head after last night's confrontation. The gardens are even more beautiful in daylight, with carefully tended beds of azaleas and camellias, creating a riot of color against the backdrop of ancient live oaks. I find a quiet bench near the river and sit, watching a great blue heron stockfish in the shallows. The peace is exactly what I need after the emotional turmoil of the rehearsal dinner. I'm not alone for long. Mom finds me as she always does, with that maternal radar that never fails. "There you are," she says, settling beside me on the bench. She's wearing a new dress, powder blue silk that makes her look younger than her 62 years. "I was looking for you." "You look beautiful, Mom." "Thank you, sweetheart." She reaches over and adjusts my tie, a gesture so familiar it makes my chest ache. "I wanted to talk to you about last night." I'd been dreading this conversation. "Mom, it's fine. Really, it's just Dad being Dad." "No, it's not fine." Her voice carries an edge I rarely hear. "What he said was cruel and wrong, and I should have stopped him." "You couldn't have." "I could have and I should have." She turns to face me fully, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Eli, I have been proud of you every single day of your life. When you chose teaching, when you decided to work with inner-city kids, when you gave up better-paying jobs to stay where you felt called to be. I have been proud." The words wash over me like absolution. "Your father, he loves you, he does. But he's never understood that success isn't just about money, or titles, or impressing other people. He measures everything by his own experiences, his own definitions." "I know, Mom. But I need you to know something else." She takes my hands in hers, and I can feel them trembling slightly. "What that young priest said last night, about you saving his life, that wasn't an exaggeration, was it? That's what you do. That's who you are." Quote, "I think about all the students I've worked with over the years, all the late-night phone calls from kids in crisis, all the college recommendation letters and scholarship applications, and simple conversations that somehow mattered more than anyone realized. I try to help when I can," I say quietly. "You do more than help. You heal." She squeezes my hands tighter. "And I am so proud to be your mother." We sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the heron and the lazy drift of clouds overhead. Eventually, Mom checks her watch and sighs. "I should go help Marianne get ready. But Eli, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't let your father's words define you. You are not unsuccessful. You are not ordinary. You are extraordinary in ways that matter more than money or status or any of the things he values." I nod, not trusting my voice to remain steady. She kisses my cheek and heads back toward the house, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet wisdom of the river. The wedding ceremony is everything you'd expect from a wealthy Southern family. Elegant, traditional, and flawlessly executed. The garden has been transformed into something from a fairy tale, with white roses and magnolia blossoms everywhere, chairs arranged in perfect rows, and a string quartet playing softly as guests take their seats. I sit in the third row with Mom, watching as Dad escorts various family members to their places. He's in his element again, dressed in formal morning wear that makes him look like a general receiving honors. He doesn't acknowledge me, but I no longer expect him to. When the music changes and Marianne appears at the back of the garden, there's an audible intake of breath from the assembled guests. She looks radiant in a way that has nothing to do with her dress or makeup, and everything to do with pure joy. Behind her, Caleb stands at the altar next to Thomas, and I can see my brother's face transform as he watches his bride approach. Despite everything, I find myself smiling. Whatever else is true, whatever dysfunction exists in our family, this moment is real and beautiful and worth celebrating. Thomas performs the ceremony with quiet grace, weaving together traditional elements with personal touches that make it clear he's taken time to understand who Caleb and Marianne are as individuals and as a couple. When he asks them to recite their vows, both of them speak with the kind of honesty that makes even the most cynical guest reach for their handkerchief. "I promise to love you not just in success, but in struggle," Caleb says, his eyes locked on Marianne's. "Not just when things are easy, but when they're hard. Not just for who you are today, but for who you're still becoming." The words hit me with unexpected force. This is my little brother, the golden child who's never known real struggle, promising to love someone through difficulties he's never faced. But there's something in his voice, a maturity I hadn't recognized before, that suggests maybe he understands more than I've given him credit for. When Thomas pronounces them husband and wife, the cheer that goes up from the guests is genuine and warm. As the newlyweds make their way back down the aisle, Caleb catches my eye and nods. A small gesture, but one that feels like a bridge across the gulf that opened between us last night. The reception is held in a tent on the lawn, with round tables draped in white linen and centerpieces of white roses and greenery. I'm seated at a table with cousins I barely know, and family friends who make polite conversation about the weather and the beauty of the ceremony. It's pleasant enough, and I'm actually enjoying myself when the toasts begin. Mr. Bellweather speaks first, welcoming Caleb into the family with warmth that seems genuine despite his obvious wealth and status. Then it's Dad's turn, and I brace myself for another round of comparisons and casual humiliation. But something's different. Dad stands at the head table, looking out over the crowd, and when he begins to speak, his voice is quieter than usual, less performative. I've been thinking a lot about family this weekend, he says. About what it means to be a father. What it means to watch your children grow up and become who they're meant to be. He pauses, taking a sip of champagne, and for a moment his eyes find mine across the tent. I haven't always been the father I should have been, he continues. I've measured success by narrow definitions, judged achievement by limited standards. Last night, I was reminded that there are many ways to make a difference in this world, many ways to build a meaningful life. My heart starts beating faster. My son Caleb has built a successful business, found a wonderful partner, and created a life that makes me proud. But my son Eli, he stops, clears his throat, and I can see him struggling with words that don't come easily. Eli has built something else. Something I'm only beginning to understand. The tent has gone completely quiet. A young priest reminded me last night that my older son has spent his career shaping minds, changing lives, offering hope to young people who need it most. That's not unsuccessful. That's essential. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. I feel tears starting to blur my vision. So I want to raise a toast, Dad says, lifting his glass. Not just to Caleb and Marianne, but to all the ways we can choose to make our mark on this world. To success that can't be measured in dollars or status, but in lives touched and hearts changed. He looks directly at me now, and in his eyes I see something I've been waiting my whole life to find: respect, understanding, maybe even pride. To both my sons, he says simply, I love you both. The tent erupts in applause, but all I can hear is the sound of something fundamental shifting between us, some long-held tension finally releasing. When the toasts are over and the dancing begins, Dad makes his way across the tent to where I'm sitting. Can we take a walk, he asks. We stroll toward the river in comfortable silence, two men who are finally ready to see each other clearly. The sun is setting again, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that make the whole world look soft and forgiving. I owe you an apology, Dad says finally. You don't. I do. He stops walking and turns to face me. I've spent 30 years trying to make you into something you were never meant to be, instead of appreciating who you actually are. That's not parenting. That's selfishness. Dad, I know you love me. I do love you, but I haven't always shown it in ways you could recognize. He looks out over the water, and I can see him gathering courage for what comes next. I was wrong about your choices, Eli. Wrong about your career, wrong about what constitutes success, wrong about almost everything that matters. You wanted me to be safe. Financially secure. I understand that. No, that's not it, he shakes his head. I wanted you to be impressive. I wanted to be able to brag about you at cocktail parties and business dinners. I wanted your success to reflect well on me. He pauses, the honesty of the admission hanging between us. That's not love. That's ego. Quote, we stand in silence for a moment, watching a pelican skim the surface of the river. That boy, Thomas, he meant what he said, didn't he? About you saving his life? I just listened to him. Gave him some books. It wasn't anything special. Son, if preventing a suicide isn't special, then I don't know what is. The words hit me like a revelation. I'd never thought of it that way. Had always seen those conversations with Tommy as part of my job, something any good teacher would do. But maybe Dad's right. Maybe it was special. Maybe. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.